North Brother Island isn't a place you stumble across. You won't find it on travel guides, and no boats take visitors there. It sits in the East River, just out of sight, hidden by trees, wrapped in silence. Once, it overflowed with patients, with nurses, with death. Today, it is fenced off. The buildings are still there. The beds, the hallways, the records, everything waiting. The city moves on around it. But no one comes back. No one is allowed to. From above, North Brother Island looks almost harmless. A small, wooded patch of land in a busy river nestled between the Bronx and Rikers Island. But this quiet, uninhabited scrap of land is not empty by accident. It has a history, and that history has not been erased, only ignored. The trees you see now weren't always there. They grew over the remains of something else. The branches wrap around stairwells, roots split open corridors. The forest here did not replace a building that it swallowed one. North Brother Island began its life as a solution to a problem. In the late 19th century, disease spread quickly through crowded New York tenements. Immigrants arrived daily, sanitation was poor, doctors didn't fully understand how illness traveled, and so the city sought a place to isolate the sick, a place they couldn't leave. Somewhere nearby, but out of sight. The island was perfect, close to shore, but unreachable. There were no bridges, no roads, only water and the faint sound of the city beyond the trees. In 1885, Riverside Hospital was moved to the island. Its purpose was clear: quarantine. If you were found to be carrying smallpox, typhus, tuberculosis, or typhoid fever, this is where they sent you, sometimes against your will, especially if you were poor or spoke little English. It was not a place for healing. It was a place for containment. People came here to vanish from the public eye, and for many, they did not return. The hospital grew quickly: wards, staff housing, a morgue, even a power plant. At its peak, it was nearly a small city, but it was a city no one visited. Ferries brought the sick, boats carried out the dead. The rest of New York looked the other way. Few people even knew it existed. Those who did rarely spoke of it. It was easier to forget. Inside the hospital, life was suspended. Windows stayed shut. Families were separated. Letters were censored. Nurses moved between beds in silence. Doctors wrote records with clinical detachment. Infections spread. The rooms were crowded. The building echoed with coughing. For patients, time stopped. For staff, it dragged. The view from the island always pointed back to the city, so close you could see it, but so far you might as well be across an ocean. One patient stood out. Her name was Mary Mallon, though history would call her something else: Typhoid Mary. She was the first known healthy carrier of typhoid fever in America. She showed no symptoms, but everywhere she worked as a cook, outbreaks followed. Investigators traced at least 51 cases and 3 deaths to her. In 1907, she was forcibly quarantined on North Brother Island. She protested. She denied being sick, but she was kept in isolation, alone in a cottage at the edge of the island. She remained there, off and on, for the rest of her life. When she died in 1938, it was still on North Brother, still alone. Even as disease faded from the city thanks to antibiotics and improved public health, the island lingered in bureaucratic limbo. It was useful until it wasn't. And when it stopped being necessary, it wasn't repurposed. It wasn't torn down. It was left. By the 1940s, the hospital closed. Staff were reassigned. Doors were locked. Beds were left made. Files were left in drawers. North Brother Island entered its second phase, not as a hospital, but as a sealed memory. But it didn't stay abandoned, not yet. In the 1950s, the city tried to give it purpose again. It became a rehabilitation center for teenage drug addicts, one of the first of its kind. But the system was strict, militaristic. The teens were locked in. Escape attempts were common. The program collapsed under accusations of abuse, mismanagement, and neglect. Again, the island was emptied. Again, it was sealed. And this time, no one came back. Nature began reclaiming the island almost immediately. Roofs collapsed. Ivy spread over windows. Wooden floors buckled from moisture. Trees grew in hallways. Birds nested in wheelchairs. Yet still, the island was not open to the public. It remains owned by the city, and it is illegal to step foot there without permission. Few people ever receive it. The official reason? Safety. The buildings are unstable. The wildlife needs protection. But that explanation leaves something unsaid. Because the deeper truth is quieter. It's not just that the island is dangerous, it's that it's inconvenient. It's full of history no one wants to curate, stories no one wants to retell, deaths no one wants to account for. So the gates stay locked, the trees grow higher. And just a few hundred feet from one of the busiest cities in the world, an entire island sits untouched. Imagine waking up on an island you didn't choose. You didn't come here for peace, or escape, or even healing. You came because someone else decided you couldn't be part of the city anymore. Your name is still your own, but your freedom is not. A quiet wind rolls through the narrow trees, brushing the window outside your room. The building creaks, the river stirs. You can see the skyline, but you cannot reach it. You are on North Brother Island now. Inside the hospital, the hallways stretch long and narrow. The paint on the walls is pale, dull, often peeling. The air carries a mix of river moisture and something sterile. Days are organized by routines, not choices. You are given food. You are given a bed. You are given silence. People speak softly. Movement is controlled. Some of the others here talk about home, about the city across the water, but for most, home becomes something distant, almost imagined. Not everyone who stayed on the island was sick in a way they understood. Some showed no symptoms, some never knew the details. But policy was strict, and safety came before comfort. Over time, people stopped asking questions, they adapted. Some helped with small duties around the facility. Others stared at the ceiling, at the windows, at the unreachable world beyond. The hospital wasn't cruel, exactly, but it was cold, mechanical, built for control, not care. Even the staff lived with limitation. Nurses and orderlies had dormitories near the edge of the island. Doctors rotated in and out quickly. Supplies came only by boat. Isolation was not just for the patients. It applied to everyone. There were no stores, no theaters, no chance to walk away. And while the skyline across the river sparkled with life, the island lived by another rhythm, slower, quieter, and deeply still. Summers on the island were hot and wet. Thick air pressed against the windows. Rainwater pooled in corners of the building. Insects buzzed in the walls. Winters brought cold winds and brittle silence. Pipes froze. Snow buried the pathways. In both seasons, time dragged. Schedules repeated, days blurred. People came, fewer left. There are records, names and numbers, dates of arrival, dates of departure, sometimes no departure at all. These logs tell stories only between the lines. How long someone waited, how often someone was transferred, how many stayed for years, how many didn't make it back to the city. The building did not remember their voices, only their entries on a page. There was one patient who stood out more than most, a woman who lived in a small house away from the main building. Her meals were delivered, her movements were restricted. People knew her name, even if they didn't know her story. She became a symbol of caution, of unseen danger. She wasn't treated with cruelty, but she wasn't allowed to leave either. And slowly, the island became the only world she knew. Decades passed, the skyline changed. She stayed the same by the time the island's hospital closed. Its buildings were already worn down. Paint flaked from the ceilings. Doors stuck in their frames. Rain came through the roof and pooled on the floors. But the structures remained. One tore them down. No one fixed them either. They were left behind. Too expensive to restore, too inconvenient to deal with. So they stayed. After the hospital closed, the island was proposed for a few different purposes: public housing, a treatment center, even a park. But none of the plans ever became reality. Officials hesitated, reports circled, but slowly, it became clear the island wasn't going to be used again. It had become a place without a role, an empty folder no one wanted to open. With people gone, nature moved in. Trees grew through stairwells. Ivy blanketed old brick walls. Roots cracked tiles underfoot. Birds nested in the rafters. Wind carried in dust and leaves. Water gathered in the lower levels and stayed. The rooms once used for treatment were overtaken by quiet. Only the furniture remained, in the same places. Beds, desks, chairs, even dishes in the cafeteria never cleared. There are photos taken by the few who have been allowed to visit. In one, a patient record sits on a desk, yellowed with time. In another, an old shoe lies beside a rusted gurney. The island does not feel haunted, but it feels paused, like something that didn't end, only stopped. North Brother Island didn't fall apart in a storm or vanish in an instant. It simply faded that IT was left to itself. It held on, quietly. The ferry stopped coming. The city moved on, but the island remained, just close enough to see, just far enough to forget. There is a strange kind of stillness that follows abandonment. It's not sudden, not loud that IT doesn't announce itself. It just begins quietly, slowly spreading into the corners of a place that once breathed with routine. You notice it in the way dust gathers evenly across a chair that hasn't moved, the way ivy coils around railings no one has touched, the way the wind whistles a little louder through cracked glass because there are no longer voices to compete with. North Brother Island didn't collapse overnight. It wasn't destroyed in a single event or swallowed by some dramatic act of nature. It was simply left alone, and time took over. After the drug treatment facility closed in the early 1960s, there was no farewell ceremony, no demolition, no redevelopment. The city had other priorities, and North Brother Island was inconvenient. A scrap of land in the East River with a complicated past and expensive logistics. So they left it, not officially abandoned, not formally closed, just left. The last boat carried off the last workers, the last patients, and then nothing. Silence. Inside the buildings, everything stayed as it was. Desks with papers still filed neatly, beds still made, linens folded, light fixtures dangling, medical cabinets with labels that yellowed in the dark. Time did not erase these details that IT only softened them. Layers of dust, peeling paint, the slow invasion of vines and roots. The structures didn't collapse, they sagged, ceilings bowed, floorboards bent under the pressure of seasons. Nature's return wasn't hostile, that IT was patient. Trees grew through tiles in the maternity ward. Saplings sprouted on windowsills. Moss crept over concrete steps. Birds nested in filing cabinets. Herons, especially, made the island their sanctuary. The city, perhaps out of convenience, declared the space off limits, an ecological preserve, closed to the public. And so, its silence was sealed by policy. But it didn't always feel empty. Those who have walked the island, under rare permissions or quiet trespasses, speak of a different kind of presence. Not ghosts, exactly, just impressions. A phone on a desk with its cord still curled. A hallway where the light slants in just so, illuminating dusty footprints. A patient chart left half-filled. It's not what's gone that feels eerie, it's what remains. The ordinary things left behind, untouched. Photos taken inside show rooms with hospital beds still aligned, clipboards on the wall, bottles in a rusted medicine tray. In one, a child's book lies open beside a bed frame, the pages slightly warped by moisture. In another, a cafeteria tray sits beneath a skylight, faded plastic spoons arranged as if someone had just stepped away. Nothing is vandalized, nothing is looted, just paused, held in a kind of slow-motion collapse. Plans to revive the island have come and gone. There were talks of turning it into housing, then into a public park, then a historical site. But each time, the effort faded. Maybe because of cost, maybe because of red tape, or maybe, as some have quietly admitted, because no one wants to be responsible for waking a place that feels like it chose to sleep. And so, the silence remained. The ferry dock still exists, its wood weathered and soft, roped off with signs warning visitors away. The path into the island is overgrown, but not impassable. Trees lean in over the trails. Some buildings are barely visible through the thicket, their roofs caved in, their doors rusted shut. Others still stand tall, windows intact, watching silently from beneath layers of vines. The island's decay is not dramatic. There are no fires, no floods, no visible scars of violence. Its decline is almost elegant, a kind of architectural ghosting. The walls are intact, but the life inside has been removed. The stillness is so complete it feels curated. You could almost believe it was meant to be this way. At night, it becomes something else. The city lights shimmer across the water, casting faint reflections that dance through the trees. The wind moves leaves through broken corridors. Animals, mostly birds and small mammals, scurry across the forest floor. The island doesn't feel haunted in the traditional sense that IT feels suspended, like a memory kept whole and waiting, but one no longer needed. North Brother Island didn't ask to become forgotten, but the city let it slip away. What once buzzed with purpose, quarantine, care, recovery, now sits in silence, its purpose lost in the layers of time. No tragedy marked its end. No final chapter was written. It just faded, slowly, steadily, into a pocket of stillness. And yet, even now, the island remains visible from Manhattan. From some rooftops, you can still see its silhouette, dark and green, against the river's sheen. It's there, quiet, untouched, waiting. From across the river, it's hard to believe North Brother Island exists. The trees hide most of the buildings now. It looks like any other patch of greenery at the edge of the water, barely noticeable against the skyline. But beneath those trees is a place that time passed by. And just beyond that same river is one of the busiest, loudest cities in the world. On the Manhattan side, life moves quickly. Cars honk, subways roar beneath the pavement. Restaurants are packed. Offices buzz late into the night. Lights glow from skyscrapers, flickering across the water. There's always movement, always noise. People going somewhere, people doing something. Just minutes away from the island, children play in parks, couples walk their dogs, joggers run along the water's edge, and few ever stop to ask what's on the other side. Meanwhile, North Brother Island sits in silence. The contrast is quiet, but sharp. In one world, time is sliced into calendar invites and delivery schedules. In the other, there are no clocks, no deadlines, no footsteps. Just birds in the trees and leaves skimming across crumbling floors. The buildings on the island are hollow, but still standing. Their windows are dark, their doors sealed or rotting open. Inside, nature is slowly rewriting the space. Plants grow through tile, roots creep along walls. The wind moves through empty rooms. And yet, the island is not far. From some apartment balconies, you can see it, a dark patch in the water. Most don't know its name. Some assume it's just a bird sanctuary. Others never notice it at all. And maybe that's part of why it was forgotten. North Brother Island was never grand. It had no monument, no wide roads, no famous guests. It served a purpose, first as quarantine, later as treatment. And when that purpose ended, it wasn't needed anymore. During its early years, the separation from the city was intentional. The water was a barrier, quarantine needed distance. The sick were kept apart, and the city was comfortable with that. On one side of the river, families dressed for dinner. Candles flickered in well-appointed homes. Theaters sold tickets to finely dressed crowds. On the other side, patients were left behind doors they could not open. That difference didn't vanish over time. Even when the island was used for rehabilitation in the 1950s, it remained disconnected. Few visitors came. News coverage was rare. City officials mentioned it briefly in press statements, then moved on. Most people living in New York never knew the island had reopened. They never knew young men were being sent there, many struggling with addiction, many hoping for a second chance. Even now, when the island has long been closed, the contrast continues. Manhattan is filled with new buildings, with luxury rentals and rooftop gardens. The East River waterfront has been redesigned with smooth pathways, modern benches, tall glass towers. The skyline changes every few years, but the island doesn't. No one builds on North Brother Island. No one renovates that it remains as it was. Not preserved, not celebrated, just left behind. And in that stillness, there's a strange kind of power. Everything around it changes, yet it stays the same. There have been proposals to change that. Over the years, city planners have floated ideas. A memorial, a park, housing, but nothing sticks. Environmental rules, high costs, and public disinterest always seem to stop the momentum. And so the island waits, season after season, watching the world around it evolve. Some might see that as sad, a space left to fall apart. But there's another way to view it. As a rare pocket of untouched memory. A place that resisted the future. Not because it fought back, but because it was simply overlooked. It became too inconvenient to fix, too quiet to draw attention, too close to see clearly. And maybe that's what makes it feel so strange today. A full city just steps away, crowded, busy, always looking forward. And beside it, an island that still carries the weight of everything it used to be. Not cleaned up, not demolished, just paused. People live their entire lives in New York without ever learning about North Brother Island. But it's there, quiet, watching, slowly fading beneath the trees. North Brother Island is not empty, it's abandoned, yes. Forgotten by the city that once used it, but not empty. If you could walk its overgrown paths today, carefully, quietly, you would find evidence of all the lives that passed through it. The buildings still stand, though weakened by time. The walls are scarred, the roofs often open to the sky, but inside, many objects remain. Not as staged displays or preserved exhibits, just as they were left. In the old tuberculosis pavilion, hospital beds remain rusted in place. Wheelchairs sit where someone last parked them. Clipboards still hang on broken doors. In some rooms, you might find papers scattered across the floor, medical charts, intake forms, patient records. Damp now, curled at the edges. Ink fading, but names still legible. Dates, notes, numbers, lives documented, then forgotten to iron the stairwells, paint peels in wide sheets. The floors are covered in dirt and fallen leaves, sometimes thick enough to muffle footsteps. The windows are often broken or clouded with grime, but light still filters in, soft, greenish, quiet. Ivy crawls through gaps in the bricks. Moss forms patterns across once sterile tiles. Time has taken its toll not in sudden destruction, but in patient, silent takeover. Near what remains of the staff quarters, filing cabinets rust shut. Their contents spill out like secrets. Receipts for supplies, letters from city offices, schedules, memos, notes about broken equipment, notices of discipline, and sometimes small, personal items, a child's drawing, a snapped photo, a key with no label. These things were once important to someone. Now they sit, undisturbed, for decades. There is something haunting about these remains, not because they are frightening in the traditional sense, but because they are quiet. No plaques explain what they mean. No ropes or glass cases protect them. They are simply there. The last traces of lives that once moved through these hallways. Patients who watched the city lights flicker across the water. Nurses who scrubbed floors and changed sheets. Workers who delivered food, emptied bins, counted supplies. They left, but their tools did not. And in some corners of the island, nature has hidden these traces almost completely. Entire rooms have collapsed. Trees grow through floors. Vines wrap tightly around stair railings. Some buildings are entirely swallowed in greenery. But underneath, if you peeled back the plants, cleared the dirt, you'd likely find something. A cracked bottle. A drawer with labels. A boot. A rusted piece of machinery, long unused, long forgotten. The dormitory from the island's final chapter, the Drug Rehabilitation Center, is particularly eerie. In one room, educational posters still hang on the walls, faded and stained. They speak of health, recovery, new beginnings, but the silence surrounding them feels heavier than their words. Desks have toppled, pages lie face down on the floor. Beds are stripped, mattresses rotting. There's a sense that everything ended in a hurry. Like someone turned off the lights and walked away, never looking back. No one knows exactly why so much was left behind. Perhaps it was bureaucracy, perhaps it was cost, or maybe it was simply easier to forget. To let the island slip into memory rather than clean it out. To board it up, declare it off limits, and move on. Urban explorers who've managed to visit the island illegally over the years often describe the same feeling, that they are intruding on something personal, that the island doesn't feel like a ruin exactly, more like a place that expects to be used again. Rooms waiting, beds waiting, papers waiting. Even the quiet seems to be waiting. Officially, North Brother Island is protected now, a bird sanctuary. No one lives there. Few are allowed to step foot on its soil. But the remnants remain. They are not labeled, not cataloged. They have no digital archive, no museum case. They exist in a strange space between memory and decay. And there's something almost human about that. We all leave things behind. Letters in drawers, marks on the wall, a jacket hung on the back of a door. On North Brother Island, that human instinct to leave a trace is everywhere, and no one is coming to collect it. In this way, the island has become a kind of unofficial time capsule, not one designed to show off history, but one that holds it silently, without permission to forget. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling, because in the things we leave behind, there are always questions. What was this used for? Who wrote this? Why did they leave in such a rush? Were they coming back? The answers aren't written anywhere. The files are too water damaged. The people are gone. The city is busy. But the island remembers. You just have to look closely. You have to listen, because sometimes the loudest stories are the ones that no one tells out loud. Some places fade because they are far away, because they are buried, hidden, or erased on purpose. But North Brother Island is none of those. It is not remote, not distant, not even secret. It sits in plain view of one of the busiest cities on Earth. And still, it feels invisible. The question is why? Why has no one claimed it? Why is it left untouched while the rest of New York is constantly reshaped? Why is the island not turned into a park, a museum, or even a ruin people can visit? The answer, as it often is, lies in layers. Some of it is logistical. The island is difficult to reach. There are no bridges, no ferry lines. Boats don't regularly stop there. The buildings are unsafe. Floors collapse without warning. Roofs give way. Some walls tilt slightly more with each season. Repair would be expensive, restoration even more so. The trees have grown thick and tangled. The roots have sunk deep. Simply clearing the way would take weeks of effort, maybe months. Then there's policy. In recent years, the island has been designated as a bird sanctuary, a place of protection for nesting herons and other species that avoid the loud, paved world. That designation limits human access. Environmental protections prohibit certain construction, noise, and development. The city, for once, is legally required to stay away. But even beyond that, there's something harder to explain. Something more emotional. North Brother Island carries weight. A weight made heavier by the stories it holds. Stories of illness, isolation, and systems that failed. It is not a charming ruin. It is not a romantic ghost town. It is a reminder of disease, of quarantine, of fear, and of people who were forgotten long before the buildings ever were. Cities are often eager to celebrate their past, their grand moments, their iconic figures, their victories. But North Brother Island doesn't fit easily into those narratives. It is a place of mistakes, of neglect, of silence. It was never glamorous, never a place people wanted to go. And so, when it emptied, no one rushed to bring it back. It was easier, cleaner, to leave it be. Even now, few people advocate for restoring the island. There are no public campaigns, no documentaries with big budgets, and no tours. Most people in the city don't even know the island exists. It has become a place remembered only in fragments, in faded photographs, in old health department files, in the quiet stories passed down in some families. And even those stories are disappearing. But that doesn't mean the island is unimportant. In fact, places like this may be more valuable than we realize, because they offer a mirror. Not a clean one, not polished, but reflective in its own way. North Brother Island is a record, not just of what happened, but of what was allowed to happen, of what society accepted, ignored, and forgot. It is a space where people were sent to vanish. First the sick, then the addicted, then the buildings themselves. That IT has always absorbed what others didn't want to see. And when it became too full, too broken, too inconvenient to manage, the whole place was locked and left behind. And yet, it survives, through rain, through snow, through generations. The walls are cracked, but they stand. The island is damaged, but it lives. Quietly, patiently, like it's waiting for someone to notice it. Not to fix it, maybe, just to see it. To understand what it meant. To admit what it was. North Brother Island is not just about one disease, one event, or one forgotten institution. It's about the pattern, the recurring instinct to separate the unwanted, to place hardship out of view, to draw borders not just on maps, but between people, to build walls, real and imagined, around those who suffer, and then walk away. But islands don't forget. The trees grow, the buildings crumble, but the stories remain. The past echoes differently in abandoned places. It lingers longer, the silence fills with memory. And when you walk through those spaces, even in imagination, you carry some of that weight with you. There's no plaque on North Brother Island to explain all of this. No visitor center to guide you through the layers. The stories are scattered in the peeling paint, in the rusted beds, in the papers soaked by rain. It asks you to listen differently, to look longer, to imagine more. Because in the end, the island is not just a place that was lost. It is a place we chose not to remember. And that choice, unnoticed, North Brother Island will likely never change. Not in the way we usually mean change. There will be no museums, no bustling attractions, no cleaned up ruins with gift shops nearby. It will remain where it is, just out of reach. A sliver of land floating between burrows, where vines grow over hospital doors and trees root themselves in stairwells. The water laps at its edge, The birds return in spring, and the rest of the city moves on, not noticing. But maybe that's all right, because not every place is meant to be preserved in polished stone or behind glass. Some stories are best left quiet, untouched, allowed to breathe in the silence. North Brother Island doesn't ask to be remembered. It simply exists, steady, slow, fading but present. It is a reminder that the past is never far, even when it is hidden. There is comfort in that, in a strange way, that something can vanish from our schedules, from our news, from our maps, and still endure. That even without lights or tourists or plaques, meaning can remain. The walls of the hospital still stand. The papers still rustle when wind enters broken windows. Somewhere, deep in the underbrush, the old paths still remember where to lead. As you rest now, wherever you are, picture the island not as a warning or a horror, but as a stillness. A place where noise has stopped, where stories sleep. Let the overgrown quiet settle around your thoughts. Let the branches close above and the waves soften below. The past is always with us, even if we forget its names. North Brother Island is still there, waiting, sleeping, just like you. Good night. There's an island off the coast of Japan that looks more like a warship than land. It rises out of the ocean like a slab of concrete left behind by giants. Its gray buildings packed so tightly, there's barely any sky between them. No trees, no grass, no color. Just walls, windows, rust, and silence. For nearly a century, it was a thriving coal mining colony. Thousands of people lived here, stacked in narrow rooms, surrounded on all sides by ocean and cement. Then, one day it ended. They left everything to end farewell. No cleanup, just closed doors and cold wind. Today, the island is off limits. The government says it's dangerous. The locals don't speak of it, and the buildings stand exactly as they were, rotting, watching, and waiting. This is the story of Hashima Island. What it was, what it became, and why Japan will never open it again. Hashima Island is barely visible on a map, just a sliver of land adrift in the sea, resting off the coast of Nagasaki. At a glance, it could be mistaken for a ship or a cluster of concrete warehouses, but it's not a vessel, it's a place. A dense, gray shell of what once was a world unto itself. At its peak, it held over 5,000 people, packed into less than 16 acres. That made it one of the most densely populated places on Earth, even more than parts of modern-day Tokyo. And yet there were no cars, no trees, no parks, and no escape. It was a city carved out of concrete, built atop coal, and surrounded on all sides by an endless horizon of water. The island wasn't always this way. Before people lived here, it was nothing more than a rocky outcrop in the ocean. But beneath it lay coal, thick, valuable seams of it. In 1887, the Mitsubishi Corporation bought the island and began extracting coal from deep beneath the seabed. At first, there were just a few workers and basic wooden buildings. But storms frequently tore those early structures apart. So in the early 1900s, the company began replacing everything with concrete. Thick, durable, storm-resistant walls. They built Japan's first large-scale reinforced concrete apartment blocks, designed not for beauty, but survival. These buildings were stark and cold, but they withstood typhoons that tore through the region each year. Slowly, more buildings rose, more families arrived. Within decades, the island was filled with long, blocky towers, each connected by narrow walkways and tight stairwells. The corridors were so cramped that sunlight barely reached the ground in some places. Life here was lived vertically. People walked up and down endless flights of stairs. Rooftops became playgrounds and gardens. Laundry fluttered high above the sea on balconies barely wide enough for one person to stand. Inside the apartments, space was scarce. Entire families lived in one-room units. Walls were thin. Privacy was nearly impossible. But for many, this life represented progress. The island had electricity, running water, even television earlier than many parts of rural Japan. There was a school, a movie theater, a hospital, a community center, and small shops selling necessities. Children ran through halls and rooftops. Neighbors knew each other. There were local festivals. Despite the grayness, there was color in the form of human life. Yet, beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, life was hard. The coal mine ran deep under the ocean floor, reaching depths of over 1,000 feet. Men worked in intense heat and near-constant humidity. Ventilation was poor. Accidents happened. There were collapses, there were fires, and always the risk of not coming back. The deeper the mine went, the harder the work became. But the pay was better than elsewhere. Workers endured it, and their families built lives on the surface. Some men commuted from the mainland, but most lived on the island year-round, rarely leaving. The sea was both a barrier and a wall, isolating the community from the rest of the world. Over time, Hashima began to feel like a city in miniature, but one with no room to grow. The buildings became worn, the gray got darker. As Japan's economy shifted from coal to oil, the mine's importance faded. By the late 1960s, production had slowed. Mitsubishi knew the mine wasn't sustainable. In 1974, they announced it would shut down. The end came quickly. Within weeks, the island was abandoned. Thousands of people left, many never returning. They left behind furniture, clothing, dishes, schoolbooks, toys, radios. Everything remained where it had been. No one came to dismantle or demolish anything. The doors were locked, the buildings were sealed, and the island was left to decay. Since then, Hashima has remained closed to the public. The concrete towers still stand, though crumbling and rust-stained. Salt air and typhoons have eaten away at the walls. Plants have taken root in cracks and crevices. The sound of footsteps has long vanished. In its place, wind, rust, and silence. Time stopped here, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, gentle retreat, as if the island simply exhaled and everyone vanished. By the 1950s, Hashima Island had fully matured into its final form, a concrete labyrinth pressed against the sea, operating like a machine. At a distance, it looked like a forgotten military base or a broken monument to industry. But if you had stepped through its narrow gates in those years, you would have found a place that was, in its own way, alive. There were people everywhere, children laughing on rooftop playgrounds, mothers hanging clothes to dry on shared balconies, workers in uniforms moving in and out of narrow stairwells like clockwork. The buildings had names, but most residents remembered them by numbers. Building 30, Building 65, and so on. Each one was a narrow tower of repeating rectangles, uniform in shape, towering over the sea. The corridors inside were long and dim, with exposed pipes running overhead and bare concrete underfoot. Each apartment was small, usually 1 or 2 rooms, outfitted with the absolute minimum: beds, a low table, a gas stove, maybe a radio if a family could afford one. Thin sliding doors separated sleeping areas from kitchens. Privacy, even for married couples, was mostly symbolic. Neighbors lived wall to wall, sound to sound. Conversations carried through paper-thin walls. Footsteps upstairs were part of the rhythm of everyday life. And yet, most residents adapted. Some even found comfort in the closeness. Children belonged to the community, not just to their parents. If a child cried in the hallway, someone would answer. School was held in a tall building near the center of the island. Its rooftop doubled as a sports field, surrounded by metal railings to prevent balls and children from tumbling into the sea. The view from the school roof was striking. On clear days, you could see the coast of Nagasaki. But for many children, the mainland might as well have been a foreign country. The sea was always in sight, but always out of reach. People rarely swam. The coastline was rocky, sharp, and dangerous, and the water, warm and dark, was filled with boat traffic and the waste of thousands. Life followed a strict rhythm. Loudspeakers announced the start of shifts. Miners descended by elevator and narrow shaft into the deep tunnels below, where temperatures rose as high as 30 or even 40 degrees Celsius. Ventilation was poor, the air was damp and heavy. Miners often worked shirtless, covered in coal dust, wiping sweat from their eyes with blackened hands. The work was physically brutal, but it was also strangely invisible to the rest of the island. Above ground, life continued. Families cooked rice, children studied for exams, neighbors gossiped in the alleys. Many residents never set foot in the mine. Some worked in support roles, in maintenance, education, or healthcare. Others ran the island shops or provided meals to laborers. On weekends, the movie theater offered brief escapes, showing films from the mainland. The cinema was small, dark, and thick with cigarette smoke. But for a few hours, it offered glimpses into a wider world. One with roads, trees, and color. As the years passed, residents began to notice small shifts. The buildings, once new and sharp-edged, began to wear. Salt air gnawed at railings and door hinges. Walls began to crack. Leaks appeared in ceilings. Repairs were made when possible, but time always had the upper hand. And then came the rumors. Whispers that coal was no longer in demand, that the company might shut down the mine. For children growing up on Hashima, it sounded impossible. The island had always been there, always working, always full. But by the late 1960s, signs of withdrawal were visible. Fewer ships arrived. Supplies became irregular. Shops closed. Some families quietly left, taking early transfers to the mainland. The school saw fewer students each year. And yet, for those who remained, the rhythm continued. Meals were cooked, lessons were taught, movies played, but a slow unraveling had begun. One not marked by drama, but by absence. Fewer faces in the stairwells. Fewer lights on at night. Fewer voices echoing in the long concrete halls. It wasn't collapse, not yet, but it was a stillness that hadn't been there before. The year was 1974. After decades of operation, the coal under Hashima Island was no longer worth the effort. Cheaper fuels, shifting energy priorities, and declining production had all caught up. The announcement came in the spring, quiet, bureaucratic, final. Mitsubishi would shut down the mine. There would be no new jobs offered, no rescue plan, just closure. And once the mine stopped, the island stopped too. Everything that existed here depended on that dark vein beneath the sea. With no coal to pull from the earth, there was no reason left to stay. What followed was a kind of vanishing act. Over the span of just a few months, Hashima emptied. 5,000 people moved out. Entire families packed up what they could carry and boarded boats bound for Nagasaki. It wasn't dramatic. There were no sirens, no official ceremonies, just the quiet scraping of furniture on concrete, the soft thud of boxes being stacked, and the hum of engines as the ferries pulled away. Many people thought they'd come back, if only to retrieve the rest of their belongings. But most never did. The departure was too complete, too final, and as the last boats left, the sea folded itself back around the island, and silence took over. What was left behind was a perfectly preserved memory. Radios still sat on shelves. Dishes were left drying on counters. Schoolbooks remained on desks, mid-lesson. Slippers in hallways, calendars still pinned to the wall. It looked less like abandonment and more like disappearance, as if life had been paused rather than ended. But time, of course, didn't pause. The concrete began to crack. Rain poured in through broken windows. Wind whistled through shattered glass. Without people, Hashima began to unravel. And yet, it didn't collapse. The buildings stood, leaning, eroding, but standing, doorways darkened by salt. Rust spread across pipes and rebar. But the layout remained, the old walkways, the crumbling stairwells, the empty rooms. It all remained, like a memory with edges worn soft by time. For years, the island was sealed. Visitors were banned, not because of ghosts or legends, but because it was simply too dangerous. The structures were no longer stable. Floors caved in. Railings gave way with a touch. And yet, people wondered, what was it like inside? What stories had been left behind? Some imagined it haunted, others called it cursed. But the truth was simpler and stranger. Hashima was quiet. Not evil, just empty. A place that once pulsed with labor, with noise, with heat, now reduced to nothing but the slow erosion of stone and steel. Occasionally, researchers visited under strict conditions. They documented the decay. They took photographs of collapsing rooftops and overgrown courtyards. In one shot, a desk remains, covered in dust, with an old textbook still open to a math problem never finished. In another, a child's tricycle sits in a hallway, its wheels locked with rust, facing a door that no one ever opened again. Nature tried to reclaim the place, but only in fragments. Vines crept through cracks. Moss found footholds in shaded corners. But the sea, not the earth, rules here. Salt-heavy winds peel paint from the walls. Rain pools on rooftops, leaking through layers of concrete. Over time, colors drained away, leaving only grays and browns, the palette of abandonment. And in this stillness, something strange happened. The island became beautiful. Not in a traditional way. There is no elegance here, but in its honesty. In its quiet testimony to what was built, lived in, and left. It is a monument not to disaster, but to departure, not to collapse, but to the quiet weight of time. Above the mines and far beyond the sea, the decisions that shaped Hashima Island were made in quiet, carpeted boardrooms. Executives from the Mitsubishi Corporation, dressed in clean suits and polished shoes, studied fuel charts, production graphs, and international market reports. To them, Hashima was not a home or a city. It was a facility, a coordinate, a line item measured by output and cost efficiency. Most of these men had never touched its rusting railings or stood on its crowded balconies. They had never descended the vertical tunnels carved deep beneath the ocean, nor tasted the mineral-rich air or felt the constant vibration of machinery through concrete walls. They knew the numbers, but not the noise, not the rhythm, not the people. The island, to them, was a system that functioned or didn't, a machine to be started or shut off. It was only geography wrapped around a goal. But on the surface of the island, life moved to a very different tempo. Miners woke early, their mornings marked by the clatter of boots, the metallic grind of elevators, and the low rumble of the earth below. In the depths, they worked in humid darkness, their breath mixing with the thick air as they chipped and hauled, hour after hour. The shafts were narrow, the air stale. Heat built with every meter of descent. It was not just physical labor, it was endurance against discomfort. They moved carefully, each gesture practiced and quiet, mindful of collapsing supports or faulty lamps. Accidents did happen, but rarely spoken of in detail. The men endured it with a kind of stoic rhythm, knowing that each day's labor secured another ration of rice, another month of school for their children, another sunrise on the narrow concrete ledge of life. Above ground, the island buzzed with quiet routines. Mothers folded laundry inside cramped rooms. Children traced kanji in worn notebooks. Neighbors exchanged rice bowls through open windows. Despite the harshness of the space, a kind of harmony existed. People adapted to the vertical living, to the narrow walkways, to the shared noise and lack of privacy. They found ways to thrive, even in confinement. They planted potted herbs where sunlight crept through. They painted murals inside schools. They gathered for community festivals lit by paper lanterns. Occasionally, musicians would gather on rooftops with traditional instruments, the soft twang of shamisen drifting out over the sea. There was a cinema, a school, a clinic, even a rooftop garden where children could play in brief patches of open sky. And while the workers risked injury or worse underground, they returned each night to this suspended world of concrete and salt. Life on Hashima was difficult, but structured, predictable, familiar. There was a strange comfort in that, knowing that despite the isolation, despite the limits, life followed a rhythm. But the balance was delicate. When the executives decided to close the mine in 1974, it was a quiet decision made far away. No town meeting in farewell ceremony. Just a date, a schedule. Instructions to leave. For the company, it was efficiency. For the residents, it was erasure. The message was clear. They had never owned the island. Not truly. Not in a way that could protect them. What they had built was temporary, disposable, and now it was finished. The exodus was swift and solemn. Families packed what they could in boxes and crates. Plants were left on windowsills. Books remained on shelves. In some apartments, food was still on the table when the last door closed. Many assumed they'd return. Some wrote letters that never reached anyone. Others left toys behind, thinking the break would be short. But time doesn't pause. Within weeks, nature began its slow invasion. Ceilings leaked. Winds broke windows. Salt corroded wiring. What the people had left behind remained, not out of preservation, but abandonment. And in that stillness, a new identity formed. One shaped not by labor or routine, but by absence. Tourists today walk narrow paths behind safety railings, peering into rooms where no one has slept in 50 years. The island feels frozen, as though someone pressed pause on a loud, breathing world. Yet the silence isn't peaceful, that it's hollow. Not haunted in the supernatural sense, but in the deeply human one. You sense the absence of lives once full, now vanished. You feel the weight of a decision made in an office far from shore. The island did not burn. It was not swallowed by water. It was not bombed or buried. It was forgotten, its people removed. Its purpose ended, and in its place remains a relic, a gray ghost on the sea, made not of myth, but of memory. The walls still stand, the stairwells still rise, but the stories inside them drift slowly away, fading each year beneath the hum of wind and the hush of water. Not destroyed, not mourned, just quietly no longer needed. Elsewhere, as Japan rebuilt itself into a modern power, the rest of the country moved forward. Cities expanded, highways stretched across the land, neon signs flickered to life in once quiet districts. But out on the sea, Hashima Island sat still. It did not decay quickly. Its buildings were made of thick concrete, built to resist the pounding wind and salt. But time does not need to rush. Slowly, gently, the island began to shift. A cracked window here, a rusted pipe there. Rooftop gardens overtaken by moss. A chair collapsed under its own weight. There were no caretakers, no defenders. No reason for it to remain more than it was. The world didn't need its coal anymore, and no one needed to remember the way it once breathed with life. But not everything faded. Some memories stayed. In photographs, the school gym still had its climbing ropes hanging. In the hospital, surgical tools still rested on trays. On a blackboard in a long-abandoned classroom, faint chalk still spelled out a lesson left unfinished. These fragments exist without urgency. They are not preserved behind glass. They are simply there, left behind because no one was told to take them. And the island itself, once so full of motion, became something else entirely, an artifact without a caption. A place you can look at, but not quite touch. A structure that once supported life, now supporting silence. What makes Hashima so strange is not its shape or its history alone. It is the way it refuses to be one thing. It is not a ruin like a castle. It is not a relic like a shrine. It is not a battlefield or a burial site. It is something quieter, a place of work that outlived its workers. A home that forgot its residents. A machine that was turned off, but never dismantled. In that sense, it is more ghost than place. Not haunted by spirits, but by unfinished routines. A broom leaning against a wall, a teacup on a windowsill, a blanket folded at the end of a narrow bed. Things not placed for display, but left in motion. Interrupted, not concluded. Over the years, interest returned. Not from families, but from filmmakers and photographers. Documentaries were shot. Drone footage captured its tight, gray layout. Urban explorers risked injury to walk its narrow halls. Some imagined horror stories. Others told tales of ghosts. But the real story, the quiet story, is in what was never meant to be remembered. The walk to school with a lunchbox. The sound of chopsticks tapping on bowls. The small games played on staircases. The comfort of patterns, the absence of luxury. The presence of repetition. The way life happened because it had to, not because it was noticed. And even today, standing on a boat just offshore, you can still see the grid of buildings. Still recognize the stairwells and the balconies. You can imagine the lights turning on at night, the gentle clatter of dishes, the low voices of families finishing dinner. But when the boat turns back to the mainland, those sounds fade. The outline of the island recedes, and with it, the memory of the people who once filled it. They did not ask to make history. They lived because they were told to live here, and when told to leave, they did. No monuments were raised, and no ceremony marked the last step off the island. But in that stillness, in that absence, something lingers. Hashima remains not because it was extraordinary, but because it was forgotten with such completeness that it became uncommonly intact. It tells us what happens not when a place is destroyed, but when it is no longer needed. No one rebuilt it, that no one erased it. And so it remains, floating quietly in the sea, slowly aging in the company of wind and rain. The homes are empty, the tunnels are sealed, but the feeling endures that people were here, that they worked and lived and slept and laughed, that even in concrete corridors and narrow stairwells, life found a way to feel normal. And now, that normalcy echoes, slowly softening. There are places that fade quietly, not with fire or flood, but with time. No headline marks the moment. No bell tolls when the last voice is gone. Instead, they fall into a kind of soft forgetting, not erased, just left alone long enough to be overtaken by stillness. Hashima Island is one of those places, a fragment of industrial life, caught between sea and memory, between function and abandonment. What was once urgent became obsolete. What was once home became hushed. And now it sits, unmoving, unchanging, untouched by purpose. When you close your eyes and imagine the rhythm of life there, it's not the drama that stays with you. It's the ordinary, the familiar clink of bowls at dinner, the soft echo of footsteps in a stairwell, the low hum of machines far beneath your feet. These sounds were once constant. Now, only the wind remains. It's strange, isn't it? How something so full of life can disappear without anyone meaning for it to. How silence replaces noise so gently that no one notices at first. But maybe that's the nature of time. It doesn't demand attention that IT waits. It softens edges that IT covers even the deepest routines with dust. Tonight, as you lie in the comfort of your own space, far from concrete walls and sea air, think of how many places like Hiroshima lie sleeping. Pieces of the past, suspended in quiet. Not famous, not feared. Just there, waiting in the background of history. And perhaps that's all they ask. Not to be remembered brightly, just to be known, for a moment, before sleep. Welcome. Let your thoughts drift far back in time to a world before electricity, before writing, before cities, when the sky was vast and quiet and nights were filled only with the sounds of wind, fire, and slow breathing. Imagine a group of early humans gathered around a fire, their hands worn from travel, their eyes reflecting the flames. Something earthy burns nearby, a bundle of dried leaves or bark, and as the smoke rises, they breathe it in slowly, not knowing why, only that it changes something. The edges of the world soften, thoughts drift, eyes close, and dreams begin before sleep. Long before modern science, before medicine and ritual, humans were experimenting with the plants around them. Some were bitter, some sweet, and a few changed how the world felt, how light, sound, and memory unfolded. These plants were noticed, remembered, and passed down, not in books, but through habit and tradition. Getting high then was not escape, but curiosity, comfort, and survival. To understand what getting high was like in the caveman era, we must first understand daily life. Life in the Paleolithic period was deeply rooted in the land. Each day began with the sun, following the rhythms of weather, hunger, and movement. Small groups of 20 or 30 traveled together, hunting game, gathering edible plants, and finding shelter. There were no permanent homes, no farms, no writing, only memory, instinct, and trial. Food came from roots, tubers, berries, and nuts. Tools were carved from stone and bone. Shelters were built from branches, skins, and earth. Fire was essential for warmth, cooking, and protection. In this world, people learned by watching. They noticed which berries birds avoided, which leaves made skin itch, and which mushrooms upset stomachs. But they also noticed that some plants neither fed nor harmed, but changed perception, making the world feel slower, stranger, or more dreamlike. At first, these changes seemed accidental, a strange reaction to a new root, a vision after chewing a leaf. But over time, patterns emerged. Some plants were remembered, used again, and became part of daily life, not for entertainment, but for quiet exploration. The boundaries between medicine, ritual, and mind-altering experience blurred. A plant that dulled pain could also calm fear. One that caused dizziness could inspire dreams. Imagine a small clearing at dusk. A woman places dried herbs on a fire. Smoke rises, sharp and earthy. Others sit nearby, silent, waiting, breathing in warmth, letting sensation settle. No words, just practice, repeated and refined. Getting high was part of the human relationship with nature. Watching animals, humans learned even more. Some birds and mammals consumed fermented fruit. Others chewed specific roots when sick. These observations were not lost. Early humans tried things carefully, remembered what worked, learned to mix herbs, oil bark, and dry leaves. Slowly, certain plants earned a place in their routine. Across regions, substances differed. In Europe, psychoactive mushrooms. In Africa, seeds and roots with stimulant effects. In the Americas, early tobacco and herbs. These were not party drugs, but part of life, sometimes to dull pain, sometimes to connect with spirits, and sometimes to ease long nights. The experience was subtle, gentle shifts, lightening mood, softening fear. For people facing daily dangers, these small escapes offered comfort, not breaks from reality, but softening of it. Long before history began, before myths were carved in stone, humans explored both the world around them and the one within, using what the land provided and discovering slowly and carefully the earliest altered states of mind. In the next part, we will meet a man preserved in ice thousands of years ago who carried herbs, mushrooms, and tools hinting at early rituals of getting high. We will learn his story next. High in the Alps, beneath layers of ancient snow and silent centuries of drifting ice, a lone traveler once made his way along the high ridges of what we now know as the Ötztal Mountains, moving through an unforgiving landscape with only the things he could carry and the wisdom passed down through generations before him. His name, given long after his final breath, is Ötzi the Iceman, and he lived more than 5,000 years ago, in a time before cities, before written language, before even the wheel had become widespread. When his body was discovered by hikers in 1991, it was far more than an archaeological curiosity. Ötzi was a fully preserved human being from the Copper Age, a frozen snapshot of a life once lived in motion. His body carried tattoos, over 60 in total, most of them arranged along lines of tension in the back and joints, suggesting that he may have used these markings for pain relief or in some kind of therapeutic or symbolic healing tradition. His clothing was made from animal hides, layered and sewn with sinew, prepared carefully for cold weather travel. He had a copper-bladed axe, a flint knife, and arrows still under construction in his quiver. But among the most quietly revealing items he carried were two different types of dried mushrooms, tucked carefully into his leather pouch. One of these was birch polypore, which has antimicrobial properties and has long been associated with traditional healing, while the other, the tinder fungus, was ideal for transporting embers and may have also served other purposes, perhaps calming, soothing, or gently mind-altering when burned or inhaled in smoke. While we cannot know exactly how Ötzi used these plants, the care with which they were stored and the types of fungi chosen suggested deeper knowledge of their effects. It's possible that in moments of rest, he sat by his small fire and placed pieces of mushroom on the embers, breathing in their earthy aroma as the wind shifted in the mountains. These experiences likely didn't involve strong or overpowering changes, but rather subtle adjustments to how the world felt. Perhaps a slight easing of pain, or a sense of relaxation, or a softening of mood after long, cold journeys. For prehistoric people, the boundary between body and mind was not sharply drawn. Relief from pain, from hunger, or from emotional weight may have come from the same roots, leaves, and fungi that also helped them stay warm, heal wounds, or prepare for sleep. Across the ancient world, other early communities were doing similar things, experimenting, observing, remembering. In the highlands of Central Asia, researchers have discovered traces of early ritual fires where people burned plants like wild hemp in enclosed spaces. In parts of South America, even before the rise of farming, early humans chewed the leaves of stimulating plants to help endure difficult journeys. In Africa and the Middle East, fermented roots and naturally occurring herbs were added to drinks or burned in communal spaces to support well-being or create shared calming experiences. These weren't synthetic substances or isolated chemicals. They were natural, raw elements of the landscape, used with restraint and respect. Getting into a different state of mind was not a goal in itself, but a side effect of taking care of the body and staying in rhythm with the natural world. Imagine the simple quiet of those moments, a traveler pausing, breathing in warmth, allowing the tension in his muscles to ease just a little. Whether alone or among others, these early humans found ways to adjust their inner state using only what the world offered them. Their understanding came not from books, but from generations of trial, observation, and patient repetition. Ötzi's story, though ending in tragedy, offers a moment of connection, a view into how someone like him might have turned to nature for comfort, not just survival. His tools were for cutting, scraping, building, but his plants may have been for calming, healing, and entering a gentler state of awareness. In our next segment, we will explore how these early interactions with natural elements, smoke, light, sound, and silence, shaped not only the body and mind, but may have also helped spark the very first expressions of art, memory, and meaning in human history. Long before Ötzi climbed the high passes of the Alps, even before metal tools or stitched clothing, Early humans gathered around low fires in darkened caves, sheltered from the wind and the cold, their lives shaped by rhythms of daylight, weather, and the steady movements of animals they followed across the land. In these dim spaces, hidden deep in the stone, we find some of the earliest evidence of human thought made visible: painted hands, swirling patterns, and animals stretched in motion across rough rock walls. These caves, scattered across Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia, were not homes in the usual sense. They seem to have been reserved for something else: quiet places set apart, where time felt different and where certain activities took place that carried more meaning than hunting or shelter. In many of these caves, signs point to an atmosphere of ritual or altered awareness. The darkness, the echo of breath against stone, the flicker of firelight casting shadows that danced and shifted. These spaces weren't just visual, but sensory. Researchers have found that many cave chambers with the most intricate art also have strong acoustic properties. Sounds carry and bounce in strange ways, making quiet singing or rhythmic drumming into something immersive, almost trance-like. In some caves, pigment was blown onto the walls through hollowed reeds, leaving outlines of hands as if marking presence or memory. Elsewhere, red ochre and charcoal were used to create animals in motion: bison leaping, horses galloping, deer running, all layered one over the other, as though capturing not just the creature, but the feeling of movement and time. Alongside this artwork, traces of burnt herbs, resins, and natural compounds have been found, suggesting that smoke and scent played a role in whatever was taking place within those walls. The smells would have been earthy, on embers, sharp, or ground sometimes into powders. Sweet. These natural materials may have produced mild effects on mood, awareness, or body sensation. It's not difficult to imagine a small group of people sitting close together, the only light from a fire reflecting off stone walls, the air thick with warmth and scent, their minds gently shifting from the ordinary to the symbolic. These experiences wouldn't have been labeled or explained. They were simply part of being alive in a world where meaning was sensed before it was spoken. The connection between natural elements and mental states may have been felt through rhythm, light, and scent, not studied or defined, but passed down through shared moments. Sound especially may have played a large role. Simple rhythms, tapping stones together, repeating chants, or humming softly in the dark could change how the body felt, slow the heart, deepen breathing, and create a feeling of connection or flow. Combined with flickering light and the scent of familiar herbs, this could guide early minds into states of calm reflection or vivid imagination. Some researchers suggest that these quiet, altered states helped spark symbolic thinking, the ability to represent something, to imagine what is not present, to remember what is gone, or to hope for what is not yet come. Cave art could be the earliest visible sign of this shift. Not just marks on a wall, but expressions of experience filtered through sensation and memory. And while we cannot be certain what early humans felt in those moments, we can look at the layers of their surroundings and recognize the elements of comfort, repetition, and sensory immersion that make up the foundation of ritual even today. The use of soft smoke, rhythmic sound, darkness, and image echoes the elements we still use to settle our minds: firelight, music, memory, breath. The caves were spaces of stillness, but also of quiet transformation, where early people may have touched something just beyond their normal state of mind, guided not by instruction, but by the slow discovery of what plants, sounds, and spaces could do. In the next segment, we'll shift our focus from early communal spaces to a different layer of ancient life. The people who lived differently, who held more influence or special roles, and how their access to rare plants or guarded knowledge may have shaped the first keepers of memory, ritual, and healing. As early communities became more complex, so too did the roles people played within them. While most individuals hunted, gathered, crafted tools, and raised children, there were always a few whose paths seemed to diverge. Those who stayed closer to the fire, who remembered stories longer, who listened more carefully to the sound of leaves in the wind, or noticed which plants helped a wound heal or made a fever break. These early observers of pattern, these quiet listeners, likely became the first keepers of special knowledge. They didn't hold power in the way kings or leaders would centuries later, but they held something more subtle, an ability to remember, to interpret, and to guide. In small communities where daily survival was shared work, the people who understood which herbs to gather or how to prepare certain roots might have been seen with respect or caution. They knew which leaves eased the stomach, which bark helped stop bleeding, and perhaps which combinations of smoke, warmth, and rhythm helped someone calm down after fear or grief. Some of these people may have played roles in early rituals or seasonal gatherings, helping others feel connected to the land, to memory, or to dreams. They might have been the ones who kept certain plants hidden or dried in special places, using them carefully and not often, reserving their effects for moments of meaning, times of illness, change, or loss. These were not scientists or doctors as we think of them today, but their knowledge was real, gathered through generations of observation, slow trial and error, and passed down through gesture, repetition, and quiet practice. In some regions, these individuals may have been involved in rites of passage, helping younger members of the group transition into adulthood with a sense of inner change or clarity, using herbs or rhythmic ceremonies to mark that shift. In others, they might have been seen as dream guides or memory holders, helping interpret unusual experiences or strange emotions through the patterns they saw in nature. The line between health, spirit, and community was not drawn sharply in ancient life. It flowed gently, and those who moved most easily within it were given roles that held deep trust. Access to certain rare plants may have been limited, not because of greed, but because of the responsibility they carried. The same root that eased pain might become dangerous if misused. The same smoke that soothed anxiety could overwhelm if too strong. Understanding these nuances was part of what made these early guides important. Across ancient regions, from the highlands of Asia to the forests of Africa and the valleys of Europe, we see echoes of this pattern. Certain graves filled with items not meant for battle or daily labor, but with bundles of dried plants, carved stones, or pigments carefully wrapped and buried with care. These were likely not warriors or chieftains, but individuals whose roles centered around healing, memory, and transformation. Perhaps they were the first herbalists, the first midwives, the first to help others rest, reflect, or enter a dreamlike space when needed. Their actions were not dramatic. There were no loud ceremonies or grand speeches, just the steady rhythm of hands grinding leaves, the whisper of breath through hollow reeds, the calm repetition of motions passed down from one generation to the next. In this way, early humans discovered not just how to survive, but how to care for the mind, how to bring stillness when fear crept in, how to mark grief, and how to prepare for the unknown. These quiet figures, seated beside the fire, watching smoke rise into the night sky, gave something lasting to the people around them. Moments of calm, small shifts in awareness, and a way of seeing the world not only as something to be endured, but something that could be understood, softened, and shared. In the final part of our journey, we'll step back and gently reflect on how these early practices still echo faintly through time, and how the very human desire for peace, rest, and clarity remains as strong today as it was in the quiet shadows of ancient caves and high mountain passes. And so we find ourselves at the end of this long and quiet path through time, having walked beside hunters and gatherers, healers and guides, travelers and dreamers who once stood beneath ancient skies and gathered the leaves, roots, and stones that shaped their days and softened their nights. From the quiet depths of painted caves to the cold slopes where Otzi once moved between stone and snow. From the low fires where early hands crushed herbs and watched the smoke rise, to the careful rituals passed down in silence and memory, we've traced a simple and enduring human desire. The need to feel something different, something more manageable, something calmer. Not through excess or escape, but through observation, rhythm, and trust in the natural world. These people didn't chase thrills or alter their senses for pleasure. They sought comfort, understanding, and healing, using only what the earth offered in its slow, generous cycles. And while the words we use today, relaxation, clarity, peace, rest, might be modern, the feelings are ancient. They were there in the soft hush of wind across grasslands, in the careful placement of pigment on stone, in the echo of a hum beneath cave ceilings, in the steam rising from a heated leaf, in the stillness between heartbeats as someone sat, closed their eyes, and let the world shift gently around them. That need hasn't changed. You feel it now in the quiet moments before sleep, in the simple wish for your mind to soften, your thoughts to slow, your breath to deepen. The ancient people we've explored tonight didn't have clocks or screens or endless motion, but they too knew how heavy the world could feel and how small things, warmth, scent, memory, rhythm, could carry them through. And maybe that's what lingers most from these stories, not the tools or the names or even the practices, but the reminder that the desire to find peace within the noise has always been with us. So as you settle now into your own space, with your own breath, your own quiet, let your mind drift like smoke from a gentle fire, upward and outward, fading slowly into the comfort of rest, carrying with it the faint echo of footsteps long since gone, of hands once steady with purpose, and of a world that, for all its difference, still moved to the same slow rhythms of need, care, and calm. Sleep well. The ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface, but over 80% of it remains completely unexplored. That's not a slogan, it's a fact. We've taken more photos of the surface of Mars than the bottom of our own oceans. And that raises a question. What's hiding in the dark, where no human has ever seen and no sunlight can reach? This isn't science fiction, this is your planet. And right now, beneath your feet, in the vast black silence of the deep, things are moving. Imagine sinking into the ocean. At first, you're still near the surface. The sun filters down. You can see your hands, your body. Everything is familiar, blue, bright, open. This is called the epipelagic zone, the sunlight zone. It only reaches about 200 meters deep, that's it. And below that, everything changes. At 200 meters, you cross into the twilight zone. Light fades. Red is the first color to disappear. That's why many deep-sea creatures are bright red. It's their camouflage. To human eyes, they turn pitch black. As you fall deeper, orange vanishes, then yellow. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, light is gone completely. Total darkness, not nighttime darkness. Absolute, crushing blackness. You're now in the midnight zone, and it's one of the most hostile environments on Earth. No light, no warmth. No surface level oxygen, just pressure, and that pressure is immense. For every 10 meters you descend, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. By 1,000 meters, you're under 100 times the air pressure at sea level. It's like having an elephant stand on every square inch of your body. At 4,000 meters, it could crush a human submarine like a soda can. But here's the thing, life still exists here, and not just microscopic life. There are fish that glow in the dark, bioluminescence, built right into their bodies. Some use it to hunt, others use it to hide. There's a jellyfish called a Tala that flashes like an emergency police light when attacked, attracting even bigger predators to scare off whatever's chasing it. Some creatures here don't have eyes, they don't need them. Others have eyes the size of dinner plates, evolved to catch even the faintest trace of light from far above. And the strangest thing, they don't look monstrous. They look alien. Here, gravity feels different. Time feels slower, and nothing is silent. Despite the crushing quiet, this part of the ocean is alive with sound. Whales send low-frequency calls that travel hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles. The creaking of tectonic plates, the bubbling of deep vents, the crackling of shrimp and the pulsing of squid, all echo in the dark. The loudest recorded underwater sound, known only as the bloop, was heard across the Pacific in 1997. To this day, no one knows what made it. At these depths, sunlight has no power, but nature has adapted. There are anglerfish with light bulbs growing from their heads. Some have transparent skulls. You can literally see their brains. There are vampire squid, barrel-life fish, and creatures that dissolve if you bring them to the surface. Their bones are soft. Their flesh is watery. They've evolved not to fight the pressure, but to surrender to it. They live in a world we can't reach, and most of them, we've never even seen. In fact, scientists estimate that we've only discovered around 10% of all deep-sea species. The other 90%, still out there, still hiding. And some might be far larger than anything we've imagined. Darker ambient tone begins to rise, deeper, heavier. So what lies below all of this? What's under the midnight zone, where light has never touched and sound barely reaches? The ocean keeps going to it doesn't stop at 1,000 meters, or 3,000 dot, or even 6,000. Beneath the deepest parts of the ocean lies something far more alien. A place so extreme, only a handful of humans have ever seen it with their own eyes. And what's living down there is something we might not be ready to meet. Down here, there's no sun, no plants, and no coral reefs, no photosynthesis, and yet, the midnight zone is full of life, but it's life unlike anything on the surface. Imagine evolving in total blackness, under thousands of pounds of pressure, with no visual cues and no easy meals. What would you become? Let's meet the locals. The barrel-eye fish. It looks like something out of science fiction. It has a completely transparent head. You can literally see its brain and optic nerves. Inside that clear dome are two green tubes, its eyes, not facing forward, but straight up, through its skull. Why? Because it floats motionless in the dark, watching for the silhouette of prey above. It doesn't chase, it waits. And when something small enough swims by, it strikes with speed and precision. That's the barrel-eye, silent, still smart. Octopus, the vampire squid. Despite the name, it doesn't suck blood, but it does live over 3,000 feet deep in almost complete darkness. Its skin is jet black with glowing blue eyes, and it can eject threads of bioluminescent mucus instead of ink, because ink doesn't work in total darkness. It has webbed arms and can fold itself inside out like an umbrella to protect its soft inner body. And when threatened, it flashes bright lights from the tips of its arms to startle predators in the pitch-black sea. This creature doesn't hunt, that it floats slowly through the water, feeding on marine snow, dead organic matter falling from the surface above. It doesn't chase, that it waits. Like most things down here, the fangtooth. Now, imagine a fish with teeth so large, it can't even close its mouth. That's the fangtooth. Despite being only about 6 inches long, it has the largest teeth relative to its body size of any fish in the ocean. Its teeth are so big, the upper jaw has sockets in the skull to make room when the mouth closes. Its eyes are small, its skin is rough. Its mood, always foul. This is not a curious fish. It's built for one thing: bite, clamp, swallow. And it can survive at depths of 16,000 feet, well beyond what almost any submersible can reach. Blowfish, the blobfish, misunderstood. Most people have seen the viral meme version of the blobfish, a sad, droopy-looking pink lump. But that's not what it actually looks like in its natural habitat. On the seafloor, where it evolved to live under immense pressure, it's compact, firm, and perfectly adapted to the crushing environment. It has no swim bladder, because it doesn't need to float. It just rests on the bottom, barely moving, and waits for food to drift by. It's slow, passive, efficient. Above sea level, it collapses under normal pressure, turning into a gelatinous mess. But down below, it's doing just fine. Flashlight light, darkness, and camouflage. Here, bioluminescence isn't rare. It's the norm. Some creatures flash to communicate, others to scare predators. Some even dangle glowing lures in front of their mouths, like the anglerfish, to bait prey close enough to strike. There's a squid that glows on its back to mimic moonlight, making it invisible from below. It's called counter-illumination, a built-in stealth system. And then there are those who generate sudden light explosions, brief flashes to startle predators or disorient their prey. Think of it like underwater flashbang grenades. In a world of darkness, light becomes a weapon. Brain intelligence in the deep? Some researchers believe deep-sea cephalopods, like squids and octopuses, might have intelligence we don't fully understand. They solve puzzles, they escape enclosures. They can open jars, use tools, and mimic other species. One octopus was caught on video stealing cameras from divers and rearranging its den using rocks like building blocks. But here's the scary part. We've barely studied the ones that live past 3,000 meters. We have no idea how smart they are, because getting down there is almost impossible. DNA, we've only scratched the surface. Every year, we discover 2,000 to 3,000 new marine species, and that's just in the parts of the ocean we can reach. NOAA scientists estimate there are millions of species we haven't even identified. The deeper we go, the weirder they get. And in many cases, we only find them once, briefly captured on camera, never seen again. One fish was discovered at nearly 27,000 feet, the deepest living fish ever recorded. It had soft, translucent skin, no scales, and a fragile body that would literally explode if brought to the surface. That means there are creatures so adapted to the deep, they can only exist in total darkness, under crushing pressure, forever hidden from the surface world. SFS, subtle bass pulse, slight rise in intensity. And if nature has built things this strange in the places we can reach, what has it built in the places we can't? Deep beneath the midnight zone lies a world even more hostile. A place without sunlight, warmth, or any trace of surface life. This is the abyssal zone, a region that stretches between 3,000 and 6,000 meters deep, covering more than half of the ocean floor. Here, the temperature hovers just above freezing. The pressure is so intense it can crush steel. The landscape is flat, vast, and silent. It looks lifeless, but it's not. There are strange starfish drifting over the sediment, eels winding slowly like ghostly ribbons, and creatures that have never been seen outside this eternal blackness. But even this isn't the deepest part. Below the abyss lies the Hadal Zone, a word taken from Hades, the underworld. These are the deepest trenches on Earth, and inside them, life still clings on. Take the Mariana Trench, over 11,000 meters deep. That's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. At the very bottom, in the Challenger Deep, there is no light, no heat, and the pressure is over 1,000 times greater than at the surface. And yet, in 2012, scientists recorded living organisms there. Amphipods, small crustaceans, squirming in the mud. In 2020, a snailfish was filmed swimming near the bottom, its body translucent, soft, barely holding itself together. But it was alive. IT had adapted to a place no human could survive. And it wasn't alone. These trenches are littered with life. Unseen, unrecorded, unexplained. Many of these organisms feed on marine snow, the constant rain of dead organic material falling from above. Others rely on something even stranger. Deep underwater volcanoes, hydrothermal vents. These vents spew boiling water and minerals into the freezing ocean, creating temperatures that can reach over 700 degrees Fahrenheit. They exist along mid-ocean ridges, where tectonic plates shift and the Earth bleeds heat. And around them, entire ecosystems have evolved, completely cut off from sunlight. Here, bacteria feed on chemicals like hydrogen sulfide instead of light. And larger creatures feed on those bacteria. Giant tube worms, some over 6 feet long, live in clusters around the vents. They have no mouths, no stomachs. Instead, they absorb nutrients through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria inside their bodies. Then there are vent crabs, eyeless shrimp, heat-resistant fish, all surviving in an environment that should kill them instantly. These ecosystems don't rely on the sun. They rely on Earth itself. And they challenge everything we thought we knew about what life needs to exist. In fact, many scientists believe these deep-sea vents could be the birthplace of life on Earth, where chemistry, heat, and pressure created the first building blocks of biology. If that's true, then maybe life didn't begin in sunlight. Maybe it began in darkness. Maybe what we think of as alien is actually ancient. And the deeper we go, the older things get. Fossils have been found near these trenches, evidence of species that haven't changed in millions of years. Living fossils, creatures that have survived multiple mass extinctions, hidden from meteor strikes, surface heat waves, and climate shifts. Because down here, nothing changes quickly. It's a world frozen in time. But despite the stillness, something is always moving, something always watching. Submarines have captured footage of massive, unexplained shapes in the dark. Shadows longer than buses, moving without sound. Some believe they're just deep currents stirring sediment. Others aren't so sure. In 2016, researchers in the Gulf of Mexico recorded what looked like a giant squid, stretching more than 20 feet long. It appeared, hovered in front of the camera, and then disappeared into the black. That footage remains one of the clearest pieces of evidence that enormous, unknown life still swims in the deep. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Remote cameras have caught glimpses of long, serpentine forms, blobs that drift in patterns not consistent with jellyfish or whales, and sounds, unexplained pulses, metallic bangs, low-frequency groans, heard thousands of feet below the surface. No known geological activity. In unknown animal. Just noise, then silence. It's not that there's nothing down there. It's that we've barely looked. The average person knows more about the moon than the Hadal trenches of Earth. And when we do send machines down, they only last for hours before needing to return. The pressure destroys equipment. The temperature warps steel. Communication lags or cuts off completely. We are not welcome here. But life has always been here. In the deepest parts of our world, creatures have evolved beyond our comprehension. In silence, in darkness. In solitude, not monsters, not aliens. Just life, doing what it does best, surviving. And if they've adapted to that, what else might they be capable of? Most people assume Earth has been explored, that we've seen it all. But when it comes to the deep ocean, we've barely even begun. Over 80% of it remains unmapped and unexplored. That's not just a guess, it's a fact. We've mapped the surface of Mars and the Moon more thoroughly than we've mapped the floor of our own oceans. And the reason is simple. It's almost impossible to reach. Light disappears a few hundred meters below the surface. At 1,000 meters, it's pitch black. But that's just the beginning. As you go deeper, pressure builds rapidly. For every 10 meters you descend, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. By 6,000 meters, the pressure is more than 600 times what you feel at sea level. That's enough to crush steel. Most underwater robots can only survive a few hours before being forced back to the surface. Human missions are even rarer. More people have walked on the moon than have visited the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The vehicles we do use are expensive, fragile, and limited. And even when they survive the descent, they can only explore small patches of ocean floor. Most of what we know about the deep sea comes from sonar imaging. It gives us rough outlines, but no fine details. Unless we send a camera down, we have no idea what's really there. And we almost never send cameras. There are massive underwater mountain ranges bigger than anything on land. Entire volcanic zones that erupt without us noticing. Deep trenches that stretch for hundreds of miles, completely unvisited. And whenever we do get a look, we almost always find something strange. In 1977, scientists discovered hydrothermal vents, cracks in the ocean floor releasing superheated water and minerals. Around them were creatures no one had seen before. Giant tube worms over 6 feet long, crabs without eyes, bacteria that survive on chemicals like hydrogen sulfide. These organisms don't need sunlight. They don't even need the surface. They live in complete darkness, surrounded by extreme pressure and boiling water. And they're thriving. That discovery changed our understanding of life on Earth. It showed us that life doesn't need light. It doesn't need warmth. It just needs a source of energy. Since then, every deep-sea expedition has returned with something new. Footage of strange animals, recordings of unknown sounds, sonar hits that don't match anything we've seen before. But most of these things go unstudied. We don't have the money or the time to investigate everything. A weird recording is filed away. A strange shape is noted and forgotten. In many cases, we never return to those places again. There are miles of trenches we've never even looked at. Some scientists believe we've only discovered 10% of all marine species. That means the majority of life in the ocean could still be completely unknown to us. Not because it's hiding, but because we've never looked. In 2016, a deep-sea microphone recorded a strange sound near Antarctica that lasted several minutes. It was loud, repeating, and didn't match any known animal, earthquake, or underwater event. To this day, it hasn't been explained. And that's just one example. Similar sounds have been recorded all over the world. Some sound like metallic bangs. Others are deep, low groans that echo for miles. But because these places are so hard to reach, we can't go back to find the source. So they're marked as unexplained and left behind. The ocean is not quiet. It's alive, moving, breathing, shifting. And every time we go a little deeper, we find more questions. What kinds of creatures live in total darkness? How do they survive? What do they eat? What happens when they die? And what happens when we finally build technology strong enough to stay down longer? The truth is, we just don't know. There could be massive animals living in the deepest parts of the ocean. There could be intelligent life that's adapted to the dark. Creatures that don't need eyes. Creatures that never surface. And they would never have to come near us. Because we can't reach them. Not yet. Our submersibles are improving. Our sonar is getting sharper. But we're still far from seeing everything. And the more we learn, the stranger it gets. There are animals that glow with their own light. Some use electrical signals to hunt. Some float for years, barely moving, waiting for food to fall from above. Some have never been filmed, never been captured, never been classified. And if something larger lives down there, something that's managed to avoid detection this long, it could do so forever. Not because it's hiding, but because we've never looked long enough to notice. The deep ocean isn't empty, that it's unknown. And as we stare into the black, trying to understand what's down there, we need to remember something. The ocean is staring back. The ocean is full of mysteries. Not fantasy, not myths. Real, recorded events that scientists still don't have answers for. One of the most famous is a sound. In 1997, underwater microphones in the Pacific picked up something strange. It was loud. It was deep. It lasted over a minute. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration called it the bloop. It didn't match any known animal, ship, or geological activity. And it came from a remote location in the southern Pacific, far from any human presence. Some theories said it might be ice breaking off Antarctica. Others suggested it could be a new species, larger than anything we've ever discovered. The truth, no one knows. The bloop was never heard again, but it wasn't the only one. There are dozens of strange sounds recorded from the deep ocean every year. Some are mechanical, others sound organic. Many are never repeated, they're documented, studied for a while, and eventually filed away as unknown. But it's not just sound. In 2014, a NOAA research team sent an unmanned submersible down into the Atlantic. What it recorded was something unexpected. As it moved along the seafloor, its camera picked up a long, snake-like creature. It moved too smoothly to be debris. It had segments. It had motion. It was alive, but no one knows what it was. It didn't match any known species. The footage went viral among researchers, but no conclusion was ever reached. It's never been seen again. Then there's the Nin, a massive, pale humanoid creature supposedly spotted by Japanese research vessels in the Southern Ocean. Reports describe it as 30 feet long, with arms, a face, and a tail. Some photos exist, but they're blurry and unconfirmed. Scientists dismiss it as a hoax, but the crew members who reported it, they've stayed quiet. Some say they were told not to speak. Others disappeared from public view completely. Whether it's real or not, no one has proven it either way. The ocean doesn't give up its secrets easily. In 2018, a deep-sea rover exploring near Puerto Rico recorded a large shadow passing just beneath its camera. No animal was visible, but the movement of water and falling sediment suggested something massive had passed by. The camera was quickly redirected, but nothing was found. The team reviewing the footage estimated the object was at least 40 feet long, but without a clear view, no classification could be made. Then there are the disappearances. Submarines have vanished without a trace, even in modern times. In 1968 alone, 4 submarines from different countries went missing. 1 American, 1 Soviet, 1 Israeli, and 1 French. All in different parts of the world. All lost under the sea. Most were never found. Some wrecks were later discovered, but with no clear explanation for why they sank. No distress calls. No survivors. Just silence. The ocean is full of shipwrecks we've never located. And in some cases, entire planes have vanished over water with no debris found. In 2007, a team exploring the Mid-Atlantic Ridge found what looked like artificial structures. Pillars, flat stone surfaces, geometric patterns, over 2 miles below the surface. The discovery was photographed, but later dismissed as natural formations. Still, the patterns were strange, too precise. Some researchers believe ancient civilizations could have been lost to rising seas thousands of years ago, and the ocean floor might still hold traces. Then there are the sightings. In 2022, a research drone captured footage of a large cephalopod-like creature far below what's considered safe pressure levels for squid. The creature was long, with tendrils that extended over 30 feet. It moved slowly, deliberately, and stayed just outside the light range of the camera. When the footage was analyzed, researchers were divided. Some said it was a giant squid. Others argued the proportions were wrong. The shape didn't match. It hasn't been seen since. We have thousands of hours of deep-sea video that still hasn't been reviewed. The footage exists, but we lack the time, budget, or manpower to look at it all. Inside that data could be things we were never meant to find. Evidence of new life, or evidence of something we can't explain. The ocean is still a blank canvas. And every strange sound, every shadow, every blurred image is a clue. We just haven't connected them yet. And maybe we're not supposed to. Because every time we get close to answers, something pulls us back. Something reminds us that we're not in control down there. That we're just visitors. That the deep ocean is ancient. And it remembers. In the deep ocean, nothing is ever fully explained. Every time we think we've seen the strangest thing, something new changes the rules. In 2004, a U.S. Navy sonar array in the North Atlantic picked up an object moving underwater at speeds faster than any known submarine. It traveled in a straight path for over 6 minutes, moving deeper, then sharply changing direction. It wasn't a whale, it wasn't a seismic event. And according to military reports, no man-made craft could survive those speeds at that depth. The object was never identified. Some called it a false reading. But the exact same movement was recorded again in 2011. Same location, same depth, same speed. This time by civilian sonar, still unexplained. It's not the only time strange motion has been tracked underwater. In 1995, a Russian deep-sea vessel reported being followed by something massive. The sonar registered a large object that moved silently, keeping pace just behind their ship. When they turned to investigate, it vanished. They scanned the area for hours. Nothing. In 1976, the body of a whale washed ashore in South Africa. But it didn't match any known species. It had smooth, white skin, a narrow, beak-like head, and flipper placements that didn't align with any marine mammal in the database. Locals called it the Margate monster. Scientists labeled it a decomposed basking shark. But the internal organs, teeth, and skull fragments didn't match. To this day, no sample was preserved. Only photos remain. In 2014, deep-sea researchers exploring near the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench spotted a field of holes in the seafloor. Each hole was perfectly round, about 6 inches wide, and stretched across the ocean bottom in a grid pattern for over 400 meters. The team had no explanation. There was no sign of geothermal activity, no debris, nothing had fallen from above. And yet, the pattern was too perfect to be random. Some suggested burrowing creatures. Others thought it might be the result of unknown current interactions. But the same holes were spotted again, thousands of miles away, in the mid-Atlantic. No known species or geological process explains it. In 2003, a commercial fishing boat pulled up its net and found more than just fish. Inside were the remains of an unidentifiable creature. It had soft, rubbery skin, a wide, flattened body, and 3 sets of fins. The fishermen said it was still slightly moving when they brought it on board. But by the time scientists arrived, it had decomposed beyond study. No one has ever caught another like it. Some think it was a deep-sea species pulled up too fast. Others think it was something completely new. Then there are the so-called false corpses. Human remains recovered from the sea that defy normal decomposition patterns. In 2018, 2 divers off the coast of Norway discovered a body wedged into a rocky trench. It had no visible wounds, but its skin was pale blue and leathery. The body showed almost no bloating, and the fingernails were described as fused together. An autopsy later claimed natural causes, but the divers and local police reported being told to remain silent about the case. The body's identity was never released. Even natural events in the deep ocean don't behave as expected. In 2011, after the Tohoku earthquake in Japan, sensors on the ocean floor recorded an intense energy spike, not from the quake, but from something that happened hours later. A powerful vibration traveled along the seafloor, separate from aftershocks. It was long, rhythmic, and repeated every 26 seconds for over an hour. Seismologists still have no explanation. The same pattern has been heard before in multiple oceans. Always deep, always regular, always unexplained. Some call it the hum. Others think it could be tectonic activity we don't understand yet. But one unsettling detail keeps surfacing. It's directional. It travels in a line, as if something is moving. We know the ocean is filled with strange creatures. Giant squids, vampire squid, deep-sea jellyfish, and animals with transparent bodies or bioluminescent patterns. But for all we've discovered, there's even more we've never seen. Submersibles often detect vibrations or movement outside the camera's view. They sense pressure changes or ripples in the water with no visible cause. One mission in the Indian Ocean was forced to abort when their pressure sensors spiked rapidly with no known source nearby. The equipment was recovered, and footage was later reviewed. For 3 seconds, the light from the submersible bent unnaturally, as if the water around it had warped. Then everything returned to normal, and no explanation was found. Scientists said it could be a lighting error, but the team that experienced it refused to go back. When questioned, they described the moment as feeling like something massive had passed above them. Something that didn't disturb the water, just the light. The deeper we go, the more questions we find, and the deeper the mystery becomes.
There's an island just off the coast of Venice that no one is allowed to visit. It's not because it's dangerous in the usual way. There are no armed guards, no radiation, no political secrets, and yet boats avoid it. Locals speak of it in whispers. And the government? They've sealed it off entirely. No tourists, no residents, just a crumbling pile of ruins sitting quietly in the lagoon. But the silence on Poveglia Island isn't empty. It's layered plague pits, asylums and fires, and something else. Something left behind that no one seems willing to name. Poveglia Island doesn't stand out from a distance. It floats just off the coast of Venice, small and overgrown. Its buildings sunken into the soft earth like collapsed tombs. But this quiet little island has a history that's anything but peaceful. Beneath the vines, beneath the stone, beneath even the soil, lie layers of something older and heavier than just time. Plague victims, burning trenches, medical experiments, and stories locals still won't repeat. It started centuries ago, when Venice was a trading empire full of narrow canals and dense crowds. When disease arrived, it arrived quickly, clinging to ships and drifting into the city with a quiet force. There was no cure, no way to slow it, and no room in the hospitals for the sick. So the Venetian government needed somewhere else. Somewhere out of the way. They chose Poveglia. It became a lazaretto, a quarantine island. Anyone showing symptoms was sent there, no matter how mild. It didn't matter who you were. Merchant, sailor, mother, child. If you coughed at the wrong time, you could find yourself on a boat heading to the island. And once you were taken, you didn't come back. People died quickly in those days. The disease was fast and the care was minimal. Bodies were buried in mass graves, sometimes dozens at a time. When space ran out, the bodies were burned. The fires burned for weeks, then months. Ash and smoke settled over the trees. Over time, the soil became a mixture of dirt and human remains. Some believe that more than 100,000 people died there, and that the island itself is now part ash, part bone, part earth. After the plague, the island was closed, but it never lost its reputation. Fishermen avoided casting their nets near Poveglia. Boats would drift farther around the lagoon just to avoid getting too close. Sometimes the tide would bring up strange pieces of the past, scorched fragments of pottery, melted glass, darkened teeth. For a time, the island remained mostly empty. Then in 1922, it was reopened again, this time as a psychiatric hospital. The idea was simple: treat those who couldn't be cared for in the city. But records from the facility are scarce. Some were lost, others were never kept. The buildings were old and crumbling, never truly meant to house patients. Stories began to circulate. Patients complaining of voices, of shadows in the hallways, of being locked in rooms without explanation. Local legend says the head doctor conducted unusual procedures in the old bell tower. Neighbors across the water claimed they could hear screaming late into the night. According to one version of the story, the doctor slowly lost his mind. He began seeing the same things his patients described. One night, he climbed to the top of the tower and jumped. The fall didn't kill him immediately. Some say he lay there, broken and whispering until something pulled him into the fog. The asylum closed not long after. The official reason was structural decay, but many suspected something more. Since the 1960s, Poveglia has been abandoned. The buildings are still there, but they're barely standing. Roofs have caved in. Ivy has taken over the walls. Trees grow through windows. The entire island smells of mildew, salt, and slow rot. The Italian government has officially banned access. You can't legally go there without permission, and permission is almost never granted. A few researchers have managed short visits. They report strange echoes, rusted surgical tables, and empty rooms where the walls seem to breathe. Some say the silence is the worst part. Not peaceful, but just still, dead still. Locals won't talk much about it. If you ask, they'll change the subject. Some say you can still hear the bell tower ringing, even though the bell was removed long ago. Others claim to have seen lights moving at night, or figures watching from broken windows. But most just look away when you mention the name. Because in Venice, a city of illusion, there are still some places too real, too raw to be absorbed into the postcard version of history. Poveglia is one of them. It sits in the lagoon, crumbling year by year, holding on to the silence, the ash, and the memory of everyone who never left. After the asylum finally closed its doors in the 1960s, no grand statement was made. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no demolition, just silence. The doctors left. The patients were relocated or simply disappeared from records. The boats stopped arriving. And the gates, once bustling with medical staff and supply runs, were locked, not officially condemned, just ignored. As if Italy itself had quietly decided to forget the island even existed. And the silence, dense and physical, remained. For decades, Poveglia sat untouched. Nature moved in slowly. Ivy crawled across abandoned stone walls. Trees grew through cracks in stairwells. Vines crept across tiled floors where gurneys once rolled. The bell tower stood watch, its top now missing the bell it once held. Tour boats steered wide. Locals stopped pointing toward it. Fishermen wouldn't cast their lines within sight of it. If asked, they'd shrug and change the subject. They called it cursed. Not loudly, just enough to be heard and never questioned. In 2014, the Italian government tried to do what governments often do with forgotten land. They attempted to lease it. A 99-year lease, to be exact. It was a quiet listing, quickly noticed by wealthy investors and curious developers. One businessman, Luigi Brugnaro, placed the winning bid. He promised to restore the island, turn the decaying hospital into a luxury hotel, add gardens, maybe even offer tours. But the public resisted. Not with protests in the streets, but with something more effective: disinterest. Petitions were signed. Historians raised eyebrows. Locals warned that the land was unstable. Restoration experts claimed the buildings were beyond saving. Engineers reviewed the soil and found it unsuitable. No company wanted the construction contract. Something about the place, they said, a heaviness, a weight. Workers didn't even want to step off the boat. The deal unraveled, quietly, like everything else about Poveglia. The lease was revoked, the investors pulled out, and the island stayed locked. Urban explorers began visiting in secret, sneaking past warning signs and docking at night. They brought cameras, flashlights, and thermal scanners. Most stayed less than an hour. Their videos show long, empty corridors overtaken by moss, cracked floor tiles buried in leaves, rusted medical tools scattered on countertops. Gurneys still sit in place. Filing cabinets hang open, their paper contents long melted by rain and mold. In the asylum wing, paint peels in layers thick as bark. Visitors whisper even when alone. Several describe hearing things, not voices exactly, but movement, the subtle scuff of shoes. In one recording, a door creaks open behind the camera, but the room was locked. When questioned, the explorers never return. Not out of fear, they say, but because the place pushes back. It doesn't want visitors. Others who've managed access, like researchers or surveyors, describe the sensation more subtly. A muffled pressure in the air, a tension without threat. One botanist noted strange plant behavior. The ivy doesn't follow light as expected. Some trees grow at odd angles, their roots breaking into walls instead of anchoring into soil. Samples were taken. The results weren't shared. A marine biologist studying algae in the surrounding water remarked on how little wildlife passed through. No birds on the shore. No fish near the docks, just silence. Even in its decay, the island maintains a kind of presence. Not screaming for attention, but insisting on solitude. Boats that drift too close report engine trouble. Radios fall to static, compasses twitch. Guides who once offered private lagoon tours have removed it from their routes. Too much trouble, they'll say. Or more honestly, no one ever asks. And still it remains owned on paper, locked behind red tape, with structures too fragile to renovate and a history too dense to escape. Occasionally, another investor expresses interest. A developer from Milan, a tourism board representative, a documentary crew. Each time the plan is reviewed, discussed, and quietly shelved. Poveglia doesn't welcome change. It has no interest in reinvention. It isn't trying to frighten anyone, but it won't be disturbed. It resists with silence. It waits, falling slowly into itself. Crumbling inch by inch, roofs collapse. Trees widen their grip. The old hospital breathes rot and salt. No headlines mark its decline. No one argues for its preservation. And so it sits alone, waiting, unowned, not because no one tried, but because no one could stay. Most haunted places become legends because people talk about them. Stories passed down, names whispered, tales growing taller over time. But Poveglia is different. The island's power doesn't come from how often it's mentioned, but from how deeply it's avoided. For decades, it hasn't just been locked to the public, it's been locked out of memory. Not erased exactly, just quietly buried under the weight of disuse and deliberate forgetting. The people who live in Venice know it's there. They pass it. They see its silhouette through the mist, but very few speak of it. Tour guides don't mention it on their routes. Maps leave it nameless. Families with old ties to the island treat it as a gap in conversation, something not to be stirred. Ask locals and you'll hear the same phrase in different forms. We just don't go there. Still, some stories find their way out. Not bold declarations, but quiet fragments. Fishermen, even today, steer clear of the waters surrounding Poveglia. Some say it's just out of tradition. Others say it's because the fish near the island come out wrong. Too pale, too soft. Their eyes clouded before they reach the surface. One boat captain claimed his nets came back full of tangled, burned reeds and dark silt, with nothing alive inside. A few older residents recall relatives whispering that bones used to wash ashore during storms. No one knows how long ago that stopped, or if it ever did. The strangest part is the silence. Not the absence of noise, but a kind of active quiet. Those who have stepped foot on the island describe a pressure not physical but mental, a weight in the chest, a sense that you've crossed into something that doesn't want you there. One visitor said it felt like being watched, not by a person but by the place itself. Another described it as walking into a room where something bad just happened, but no one will say what. There are no loud hauntings here. No jump scares, no drama, just stillness, and the way it clings to your clothes when you leave. Some believe the island carries a residual energy, not from ghosts but from repetition. Centuries of suffering compressed into one small patch of land. Waves of fear, grief and isolation, layered again and again. Quarantine ships, plague pits, hospital beds, screaming halls, and then silence, not peace, just the end of noise. This kind of repetition, some say, imprints itself onto stone and soil. And when enough fear has settled into a place, it doesn't need ghosts. The place remembers on its own. There are also subtler tales, stories not of what people saw but of what they didn't. Explorers who walked through the asylum's ruins and later realized they didn't hear any birds. No insects, no wind, even with trees moving. One described it as if the sound had been edited out of the air. In one documented account, a drone flown over the island crashed for no reason mid-flight. The footage stopped just as it passed over the hospital roof. The owner retrieved the drone later that evening. It was intact, but the memory card was wiped. And then there's the bell. The tower on Poveglia once rang daily during the hospital's operation. The bell was removed long ago, but occasionally, people on nearby islands say they've heard it. A single distant chime at night. Not loud, not regular, just there, like a memory resurfacing when no one asked for it. One fisherman claimed to have heard it twice, both times while fishing alone. He packed up immediately and didn't return to those waters for months. But even with these stories, no single legend defines the island. That's what makes Poveglia different. Most haunted places have one great tale. A murder, a ghost, a mystery. Poveglia doesn't. It has thousands of deaths, countless nameless victims, an asylum with no happy endings, and a silence that's been carefully preserved, not broken. The fear isn't of what might happen, but of what already did, and what lingers because no one ever spoke it out loud. It's not a tourist attraction. It's not part of Venice's identity. It's a gap, a blank space, and that's what makes it so heavy. There's no guidebook, no plaque, no curated history. Just crumbling buildings and the weight of being left behind. In a world that moves fast, renovates, explains, and forgets, Poveglia resists. It doesn't ask to be remembered. It just waits, slowly falling back into the lagoon, piece by piece. And even now, with no signs of life, no boats docking and no lights in the windows, there's still a feeling that something inside is listening. Quietly, patiently, as if the island itself is keeping count. Across the narrow stretch of water that separates Venice from Poveglia, life has always looked very different. From the earliest days of the island's grim purpose, the contrast between the two shores has been hard to ignore. On one side, a place of silence, rot, and death. On the other, a city known for its beauty, music, and wealth. The island was not far from the marble bridges and delicate gondolas. It wasn't distant in miles, only in mood. In Venice, the markets stayed busy. Artists painted grand frescoes inside cool stone churches. Glassblowers shaped molten beauty into chandeliers for palaces. Lovers strolled through tight alleyways lit by lanterns. And all the while, just beyond the view of most, a different story unfolded on Poveglia. A story of quarantine ships, open pits, and barred hospital windows. The elite of Venice dined on spices brought in from far ports, while plague victims were ferried to the island in silence. No grand procession, no ceremony, just long, quiet boat rides and a disappearing shoreline. Venice was always aware, but it chose distance over confrontation. As the island filled with the sick and dying, Venice turned inward, protecting its image. The palaces remained lit. Music continued to drift through the canals, and the carnival never ceased. Behind the golden masks and painted fans, there was an understanding. What happens on the island must remain there. Some called it mercy, others saw it as convenience. Either way, the rhythm of Venice moved forward, untouched by the chaos only a mile away. Wealth allowed that separation. The rich could afford walls, could pay for privacy, could write new narratives, and so the city continued to evolve, while the island decayed in place. No visitors, no inquiries, no memorials. In the 18th century, Venice reached a cultural peak. Theaters sparkled, paintings stretched across domed ceilings. Music was written to echo perfectly between stone walls. Meanwhile, Poveglia's buildings grew heavier with sorrow. Hospital corridors filled with whispers and restraints. Gardens overgrew into the paths. The bell tower, still intact then, rang not in celebration but as a quiet metronome for loss. Each sound it made marked another passing, another name never recorded. Another body moved closer to the pits. The contrast deepened. Venice painted over its history. Poveglia absorbed it. Even in modern times, the contrast hasn't softened. Today, Venice is a place of curated beauty. Visitors arrive from around the world. They photograph the canals, sip wine beside glowing buildings, and marvel at the preservation of centuries-old architecture. They hear the lapping of water, the hum of vaporettos, and the gentle creak of gondolas. Tour guides speak of Casanova, of opera, of the Republic's maritime triumphs, but not of the island just across the lagoon. Poveglia is visible from many balconies. You can see the hospital roof, the leaning tower, the tree line overtaking the buildings. But the guides don't mention it. The brochures leave it unnamed, and the hotels, some offering luxury suites with views that face the island, simply describe it as a quiet part of the lagoon. This silence is no accident. It's preservation, but of a different kind. Not of buildings or art, but of denial. Venice remembers selectively. The city celebrates what fits the image, what enhances its mythology. Poveglia, by contrast, challenges that story. It reminds people of disease, of desperation, of abandonment. It doesn't contribute to romance or elegance, and so it's left out, locked away. The buildings remain, but no one speaks of them. The records exist, but are rarely studied. The stories survive only in fragments, told in half-voice, by those who still remember to look. There's something haunting about that separation, about the idea that luxury and decay can exist so close, divided only by water, that one city can float on celebration, while its forgotten shadow quietly sinks. That visitors sip cocktails in ornate courtyards, while a few hundred meters away, vines pull hospital walls into the ground. This isn't fiction. It's not symbolism. It's geography at real space, real history, real contrast. And so Poveglia waits, not just outside the city, but outside the story. It has become the space between sentences, a place not erased, but simply not said. While Venice basks in admiration, its darkest twin sits in the lagoon, quietly refusing to disappear. Its silence in the end may be the loudest thing left. And now the lights of Venice flicker across the lagoon, soft and gold, resting gently on the water's surface. Boats drift by in the distance, unaware or uninterested, their wakes small and quiet. The air grows still. The buildings on Poveglia remain untouched. No tourists, no footsteps. Just the slow erosion of time peeling paint from forgotten walls and ivy climbing into broken windows. The silence here is thick, Not empty, but full. Heavy with the weight of all that happened, and all that was never said aloud. You imagine standing there on the shore with the quiet pressing in on every side. There are no screams now, no bells, no shouting orders or wheeled stretchers. Just wind moving through empty doorways, and the occasional groan of old wood settling into the earth. There are no signs telling you where to go. No markers, no warnings. Only ruins. But it isn't the kind of ruin that asks to be explored. It asks to be left alone. And so it has been. For decades, for lifetimes. Not sealed away with force, but ignored into disappearance. A gap in the story. A pause that no one wants to break. And yet, it's still there. It hasn't sunk, it hasn't vanished. The hospital still stands. The tower still leans. The island still waits. As you drift now towards sleep, you might picture it. Pavalia in the dark, surrounded by slow-moving water, held still by its own memory. A quiet place, heavy with history but light with sound. A place that doesn't demand to be remembered but somehow is. Floating just out of reach, just out of sight. Just enough to be forgotten by day but remembered here, in the stillness of night. A place that stays locked not just by law, but by the weight of everything that happened there. And so we leave it now. Not solved, not reclaimed, not explained away. Just left where it always was. Across the water, waiting, silent, watching the lights of Venice flicker and fade.